title of the question is it possible to go to the state of presence directly? The question is it possible to be in the state of presence without before having questioned all our stressful thoughts? I think that Byron Katie would say no. Thank you. Okay, I'll read it again. Is it possible to be in the state of presence without before having questioned all our stressful thoughts? I think that Byron Katie would say no. Okay? For those of you who don't know Byron Katie's teaching, it's about questioning your stressful thoughts so that you don't believe in every thought that comes into your head anymore. So you ask things like, when a thought arises and you make a statement about a situation, a person, about yourself, about life, you ask yourself, do I know absolutely that this is true? For example. And other questions with which you address that thought. Now, the questioner says, can one be in a state of presence without before having questioned all our stressful thoughts? Well, there is no... The questioning of your stressful thoughts implies that there is already an awareness that's arising. Without an awareness of your thoughts, you can't even question your thoughts, because you would be your thoughts. So you wouldn't be able to step outside the thought. Consciousness would not be able to, at least partially, step outside the thought and from there look at the thought and question whether this is absolutely true or whether this is just one of many possible perspectives. So the questioning of your thoughts is inseparable from the arising of presence, although not for everybody in whom presence arises. It applies that they question their thoughts. The disidentification can happen in various ways. But the arising of presence always implies a disidentification from thinking. Questioning your thoughts is a way in which that happens, one particular way in which that happens. So you cannot question all your thoughts and then enter the state of presence, as the questioner implies. It's a simultaneous process. As you question your thoughts again and again as they arise, especially stressful thoughts means thoughts that cause you upset or suffering, then you begin to disidentify, and with the disidentification, presence or awareness grows. And when it's grown enough, thought loses its power to make you unhappy, loses its power to bring about a state of stress inside you, to make you suffer, basically. So as awareness arises, awareness grows, the power of thinking to make you unhappy and to distort your experience of reality diminishes. And that's the transitional stage. And then you come to a stage where stressful thoughts don't even arise anymore. But the most important thing is already when thoughts, if they do still arise, the intermediate stage, they are recognized as stressful thoughts, so they lose their hold over you. In other words, the mind loses its hold over you. There's no longer total identification with who you are and your mind. And then in the awakened stage, stressful thoughts don't arise anymore. In other words, you don't tell yourself stories that make you unhappy or upset. And to a large extent, you can let things be. To a large extent, you can move around life without an excessive interference of thinking. You can approach situations and people and let them be, even interact without judgments. That's an enormous sense of freedom that comes in. And you become free of external conditions. The external conditions no longer have power over you. You no longer give them that power. You only give them that power through your involvement in them, and the involvement in them happens through judgment and reactivity, which are unconscious. It's a wonderful thing when you don't need to judge people anymore. You'll just let them be. And one thing you notice then with people who are conscious in an awakened state, you don't hear them commenting negatively about anybody. It's not ultimately true. Any negative comment just strengthens the ego. Don't complain about anybody. They do what they do. What can you add to that by complaining? Situations are as they are. What can you add to them by upset, shouldn't, all those mind structures? He should have, he should not have. They shouldn't, they should. I should have. Why didn't I? Why didn't he? That complicates life. But that's most people's reality. So, with the awakened state, you become very simple and just very clear. And really, no situation is complicated anymore. And you don't even try to figure out what people's motivations are. They do what they do. And today's thief or dishonest person or whatever they do, maybe 10, 20 years from now, they may be enlightened. So when you call a thief, then you've fixed him in your mind. You've created a conceptual reality for that person and stuck it on his head. But you cannot stick a conceptual reality on somebody's head without sticking an equivalent one on your head. And since the mind manufactures a conceptual reality for everybody with fixed ideas and opinions about people, often with a focus on the negative, often with a focus on their shortcomings. So you get trapped in prisons. You have a prison for everybody, a conceptual prison, not realizing that the more conceptual prisons you create for everybody else, the more you yourself get trapped in your own conceptual prison. Somebody else said that 2,000 years ago in slightly different words about judging others. But it's so prevalent, that mind pattern. And it's so satisfying to the ego, the false mind-made sense of self. With every conceptual prison that you make for somebody else, it feels strengthened in its sense of identity. The more you judge, the stronger the ego feels, because you have the authority. You are then the authority figure that judges. You are morally superior to every person that you judge and to any situation that you judge. This is the implication, the unconscious assumption. And imagine then millions of humans living in that way, forming a nation, or forming a religion, or any entity, collective entity. So the world cannot change unless those patterns change. And they do not change with the collective entities, they can only change with you. And it requires vigilance on your part to know whether or to what extent you're still doing it. As a spiritual practice, you could say, next time I complain about somebody or say anything negative, I'll notice it. Let's see if I can catch myself. And when you do, you don't need to beat yourself up. It's a success, it's not a failure. To catch yourself in a negative conditioned thought, to notice it, is you don't say, oh, you see, I'm doing it again, how dreadful. No, it's a great success to catch a thought, and then, oh wow, there it goes again. You don't even need to say go away. It's enough to see it, and then it loses its power over you. Some of you are already advanced enough, there's enough presence power in you that you can actually, by choice, say, there's nothing to think about and I won't think for a while now. And then you can even do things in that state of complete inner alert stillness. Prepare a cup of tea, and every movement happens against a background of alert stillness. Walk from point A to point B, and every step happens against this background of alert stillness. Look around you, whatever it may be, in a room or outside, perceive everything with your senses. And all the sense perceptions happen against this background of alert stillness, without any mental commentary. And you know what you're looking at without imposing any mental label on it. When you look at a tree, you don't impose the label tree on it, but you know that you're looking at a manifestation of life. The moment you put a label on it, of course we need labels on a certain level, but we also need not to be trapped in the labels that we have given things. We need to be able to use the mental labels when they are needed, but to be entirely trapped in the mental labels that we've given to everything, that's a dreadful limitation. Because the tree everything is absolutely mysterious. Everything is miraculous and mysterious. And when you put a label on it, a mental label, you think you know what it is. But you don't. It's just a mental label. So to really get to an inner realization of a tree, for example, you have to let go of the labels. And then you can sense there's more to the tree than when you utter the word tree, than you think you know. But there's a depth to that. It's an alive being also. And I'm using just tree as an example. So to be able to, this is the practice, inviting presence, thoughtless awareness into your life as much as possible, and see how much more enjoyable things become, how you notice things around you that before were meaningless, you didn't ever look at them. You notice beauty in many places that would be called ordinary, not just beauty in things that are absolutely stand out, but beauty in seemingly unremarkable things, and aliveness in seemingly inanimate things. And that comes when you perceive the world against this background of alert inner stillness. And that is, in those times, the personality recedes. Occasionally, certain thoughts may come, and then they go away again, and then the spaciousness is back. So, you'll be amazed how, as you become more familiar with that state of alert stillness, how that changes how you experience life. So you no longer experience life only as that old person that you've been stuck with since you were born. That person is still, you honor that because that's your form identity, and that person can also improve. It can learn things. It can improve in many ways. It can play in the world of form, but then the wonderful thing is the formless self or no self and who you are as a person do not remain separate. There isn't that there are times when you are completely in the formless, still and alert, and then there are other times when you are involved in thinking. There's the possibility of bringing the two together, and that happens kind of naturally after a while as you invite the alert stillness into your life more often. Then you'll notice that even when you think, that you continue to be aware of the tiniest gaps in between your thoughts, like now. And then I speak again, and then there's another little gap. And in that, you're aware of the gaps between thoughts, and you're aware, so to speak, also of a background to all thinking. That's the alert stillness is still there. And then you could engage in a discussion with someone without losing yourself in the stream of thinking, of mind, and without identifying with any mental position, which is seeking your identity, to reinforce, to strengthen your identity by defending your mental position about something. You don't need it anymore because you realize no mental position is your true identity. You can still have mental positions, but without the self in them. So there's no longer a sense of me or self in your mental. Why not keep your opinions? Everybody has certain perspective on things. You have a certain perspective on whatever, politics, philosophy, spirituality. That's fine, but you're not looking for an identity anymore in being right about something. You can still put forward your viewpoint because you're in touch with a more essential identity, and that's the stillness behind your thinking and in between the thoughts. So you can sense an alertness even while you speak, in the background and in between. So the two dimensions come together, and so the way in which you use your mind changes. In fact, you're now able to use your mind, you as the consciousness. The mind is connected, linking into that deeper dimension of no thought, which is primordial intelligence. That's where all creative insight comes from. And then your mind becomes a much more helpful tool, and it can create, it can manifest things. But what it manifests comes from the consciousness, rather than a little person that thinks, I need to manifest this or that in order to be happy. And of course, once you have manifested it, you're happy for a little while, and then you're unhappy again, needing something else to manifest. And now I need this. Okay, I've got the house now. Now I need the relationship. And then I need that. And then I need to be recognized by people. There's no end to it. And the more you have achieved on the level of form, the more you realize that that's not it. So, the two dimensions of you, here we are primarily concerned with the formless dimension, because that's what spirituality is about. There are many other things where you can go to workshops to learn how to improve your form identity, how to strengthen that. You can do it, yeah. And that's fine too, that has its place also. You could go to that kind of workshop, as long as you are in touch with something deeper, you can try it. I'm still planning to have a joint event together with Tony Robbins. But my idea about it, I don't know if it will happen, is that we would both exchange our positions so that we are not in our comfort zone. He would be sitting in a chair, and I would be pacing up and down and gesticulate. And I wonder if that position would change our teachings. So we'll see. So that, to just add a practical afterthought to this, if possible at all, do not resent encountering difficulties or problems in your life, because that's how it works. And it doesn't stop even if you awaken. Even if you're awakened, there are still things that you get challenged further. Everybody gets challenged by life in one way or another. You can't, even the trust fund baby gets challenged by life eventually. So when you encounter difficulties, small or big, see if you don't say, this should not be happening. This is the underlying attitude. If that's your underlying attitude, you're in a state of resistance. For example, many difficulties come in the form of other humans. Humans are difficult. You might have noticed. Many. So they come in the form of other humans. And then the underlying mindset for many people is, this shouldn't be happening. These people shouldn't behave like that. What we're really saying is they should be enlightened. Why aren't they? Well, what about you? So difficulties come in the form of other humans, and then you see, this is meant to be. You're meant to be challenged by other humans, and you cannot not be challenged. No matter how conscious you are, you will encounter other humans who are not, or not yet. And they will try to create problems for you, and sometimes they achieve that. It is true also that you attract fewer unconscious humans into your life as you awaken more. The awakening, it is true that you're not going to move in circles where you're surrounded completely by completely unconscious humans, but you cannot totally avoid contact with unconscious humans. In fact, they need to come into your field of consciousness because they can be helped in many cases by being in your field of consciousness. But they can only be helped if you do not react when you encounter them. If you say, you do what you have to do, but you don't, the underlying mindset is not, this shouldn't be, they shouldn't do that, they should know better. Well, they don't. So then other difficulties come in other ways, because you can encounter, so we just really talked about relationship. If other humans means relationships. They can be the intimate relationships of people living together, they can be relationships of people working together, other kinds of relationships. Then, now this already makes up for a lot of problems that people face, is relationship problems. Oh. And then you have others. If you don't have relationship problems, then life says, okay, I'll give him or her something else. Then you have a work problem at work, usually connected with relationship too, but maybe some additional factors. Or you have a health problem. So you have a problem where you live, you have a financial problem. That's a big one for many. Not enough. Or maybe there is enough, but your mind says it's not enough. Who knows? Shortage. The problem of losing your job. The problem of insecurity, which isn't a problem unless you think you should have security. That life is insecure. You don't know what's going to happen next to you. That can be a huge challenge. But once you accept that, actually insecurity can contribute, if you no longer fight it, if you don't demand that your life should be secure, it can contribute to the arising of presence, because it forces you more into the present moment. Insecurity means you go into the future and see you can't control it anymore. You don't know what's going to happen next. Oh dear, I wish I knew, I wish I had a secure job, a secure income, a secure family environment. I wish I had a secure pension plan. I wish I had a secure life insurance. I wish I had secure this and secure that. Then I would be okay. Of course, you wouldn't. These things are, if you remove the element of risk or insecurity from a person's life, this is similar to the trust fund baby, then you remove one of the most important areas where you can grow by being challenged. So sometimes the emphasis in our societies in the West is too much on security these days. I mentioned somewhere before, I read last year, I was going by a school, secondary school, and it was the beginning of the summer vacation, and they have a big sign outside where there's always notices, they post notices, and then on that big sign at the school it said, "Have a great vacation, be safe." That sounds reasonable advice, because you don't want to be unsafe. But is that the main thing of your vacation? You come back after the summer, the teacher asks you and say, "I was really safe." What did you do? "I didn't leave my room because I wanted to be really safe." So life again needs to be a balance between security and risk-taking and accepting the basic insecurity of all life. When I wrote The Power of Now, I was already in my late 40s, and I didn't have a home anymore. That wasn't the original time when I didn't have a home, because after the original time I did have a home, but then I let go of it, and then I had a limited amount of money, as I briefly mentioned in the book, to finish the book. What would happen after that? In my late 40s, no life insurance, no job prospects, no income, no savings, except those that were running out, no home, no relationship even, nothing. So, and that insecurity contributed to the intensity of presence through which the book came. It could have led to fear, and it could have blocked me if I had demanded that my life should be more secure than it is. But I did not demand that security. I accepted the insecurity, and it became enormous presence. Because all security has to do with future orientation. So the more you have future orientation, the more insecure you feel, because you cannot control the outcome. So the fact that my money was running out, that I had no home of my own anymore, I was just going from place to place, contributed to the energy behind the writing and the book. So that's a wonderful thing. Some people cannot take that step. They feel that step into the unknown. The impulse that came to me was so strong at the time when I knew I had to leave England for the reason I didn't know, and I had to move to the west coast of North America. Didn't know why, but the impulse was so strong I had to obey it. Well, I didn't have to, but I did. But I'm sure if I had not obeyed that impulse, which didn't just come once, it was there every day, I would have probably fallen ill and maybe would be dead already by now. So the life demanded that I step out into the unknown. If that is the case with you, then you know what to do. Without being rash about it, you still need to look at the practicalities. So insecurity is one of the great challenges, wonderful. And all these things, of course, life insurance, these are just illusions. How can you insure your life? First of all, life insurance isn't life insurance, it's death insurance, because that's what it is about. They just don't call it death insurance because nobody would want to buy it. So the universe, the one consciousness, whatever you want to call it, is awakening in every human. And every human's essential identity is that one consciousness. So it's not a personal thing, because if you think yourself only as a person, then you have the delusion that you're an autonomous entity cut off from everything and everybody else. But you're not an autonomous entity, you are just a cell in this vastness. And for a few years, the cell gives itself a name, or is given a name. So and so, that's me. Me. It really changes your life when the way you feel, you sense your own life to be. You are the awakening consciousness in this body. It's wonderful. So spiritual awakening is becoming awake to the aliveness of this moment. And becoming awake to the aliveness of this moment, the all there ever is, nothing else is ever going to come. You can wait for millions of years if you lived that long. Nothing is ever going to come that's not this moment. Your life will always be this moment. And it sounds, well, we know that. No, you don't. If you don't live it, you don't know it. Life is always this moment. You don't know this if you don't live it. It's only through living it that you know it. Otherwise, it's just a concept in your head. Yeah, of course, life is all at this moment. And then what's next? Where's the next moment? So you might as well then become friendly with this moment. If there's nothing else, be open to that. Don't stifle it with an excessive amount of judgments and interpretations and definitions, but be open to the aliveness of this moment. Open means there's a spaciousness here. So the shift is from a thought-based entity, which is the normal old way for humans, been for thousands of years, to a deeper entity that is based in awareness of presence, consciousness. So, because when you're not commenting on things compulsively, who are you? When you're not continuously thinking about me and my problems, at this very moment, let's say, pretend that you don't remember your past at this moment. In fact, you don't, because at this moment, unless you start a thought process, at this moment your past is not here, you're just sitting here now. But pretend for a moment, actually there is no past and there's no future. What's left of you? If I removed from your past and your future from you now, what's left? I remember nothing. What's left? I don't remember my name. Who are you? I don't know. But there must be something there. Yes, there is something there, but I can't say what it is. That's who you are. Consciousness itself. When you remove the content from consciousness for a while, then you realize that you are consciousness. When the content is thoughts and emotions and thoughts and thoughts. When the content comes back, it obscures the reality that you are consciousness, and you identify with content. And that's why some people have been able to awaken spiritually, because life took away their content. They lost everything suddenly. They lost their reputation, in other words, their name. It happens sometimes that life does these things to people. They lost their money, their possessions, they lost even their family. They suddenly were killed in an accident, a big earthquake came, everything lost, and they sit there, their house is in ruins, everything gone, and suddenly, some of these people suddenly had a deep spiritual awakening. Why? Because life took away all the things that they had identified with as themselves, as the me, and what was left was what we just did now, here, when I asked you to pretend that there's no past and future. We took away for a moment content from your life. And what is when you remove content, because content is going to disappear anyway. It's not permanent. Whatever content you have is impermanent in your life. Things come and go. Or as the Buddha says, it's impermanence is the word. Transient. Everything is transient, and that refers to content. So as long as you are identified with all the content in your life, that can go very quickly. Even your body can go very quickly. But if you just beyond content is consciousness itself, rather than what consciousness has identified with. And you are that. I am that. You and I, on that level, are the same. We are, in essence, the essence of who you are is consciousness. Everything else is added temporarily. It's a disguise. Consciousness disguising itself as this and that person, appearing in this particular form. That's the play. Leela, the divine play of life, as it's called in India. And that's fine. The play is not to be rejected. But you can only enjoy the play of the phenomenal existence if you know what is beyond phenomenal existence. So it's only if you know who you are beyond all the things in your life, you can actually truly enjoy the things in your life while they last. And you don't need to cling, because you know nothing is going to last. Relationships, whatever. It's only very young people who think there are lasting things. Then you reach a certain age and you realize, oh, it's so many things have evaporated that I thought were permanent. And more things are going to evaporate. And a few more things are going to come and then evaporate. So not to live, and your life is no longer content-based, but essence-based. I'm giving you here, in one little talk, the entire essence of what spirituality really is all about. And that's what it is. There's not much else that you need to know beyond that, in the sense of knowledge, accumulated knowledge. It is now a question of living that. And if you don't want to live it, that's fine. It means you have to suffer a bit more until you're ready to make this shift, until the shift begins to happen. A human being needs to reach the point of readiness. where they say, okay, I've done enough madness, I've suffered enough, I'm ready for the ship. I'm ready to say, okay, this moment is all there ever is. I might as well become friendly with it, acknowledge it, give it attention, in whatever form it comes. Because the form is not the moment. It's the form that this moment takes, the now. It's not what happens. The now is not what happens. It's the space in which it happened. And essentially, that space is consciousness. Everything happens in the light of consciousness. You can say, as some philosophers have done, they question everything. Some philosophers have said, is there anything I can be absolutely sure of? Because everything can be doubted. I can doubt that you exist. You can doubt that I exist. It could be a dream. Who says we are not dreaming right now? Who says that us sitting here is not a dream? You cannot know for sure. But even if it is a dream, there must be something real there, because the dream must appear to something or someone. There must be a light in which the dream appears, a space in which the dream happens. So even if it is a dream, the one thing you cannot question is the fact of being itself. Being is. The being may be a dream, or it may not be a dream. But one thing you can be certain is that you are. I am is something that cannot be doubted. I find it impossible to find inner stillness and peace with the prospect of genocide in mind. How can one remain at peace knowing genocide, torture, and kidnappings have happened and will keep happening? Could I truly remain at peace if my family members were being tortured by some military army? The last part of the question, could I truly remain at peace if my family members were being tortured by some military army? We cannot answer that here because, as far as I can tell from your question, your family members are not being tortured by some military army. So the question does not arise from an actual situation, but from thoughts in your head. You imagine what would happen if. Now, it is beyond doubt, and we all know that these things have happened and are happening, as you say, all over the planet. Therefore, you find it difficult to be at peace or to find inner stillness, knowing that these dreadful things are still happening all over the planet. That seems understandable, but is anybody being helped, you or anybody else by your unwillingness to find peace within. It's not the case that you actually go out into the world in order to alleviate the suffering or to stop all the genocide and kidnappings and torture, as you put it. Now, if you did feel called upon to go to some corner of the earth where violent or dreadful things are happening to alleviate suffering, that's another matter. If you look at human history, you can see that these things have happened thousands of years ago already. They continue to happen throughout history, to the extent that, as I sometimes put it, reading history of humanity seems like reading the story of insanity with a few lucid moments here and there. And in particular, the 20th century, a place of incredible insanity and suffering inflicted by humans on other humans. Now, once you see that your unwillingness to embrace spiritual awakening because so much unconsciousness is happening all over the planet that is the cause of the violence, that doesn't really make sense, does it? Your mind is saying, I'm refusing to invite the spiritual dimension into my life or to enter the awakening process because so many people on this planet are unconscious. Therefore, I refuse to become conscious. It's a convenient excuse for the egoic mind to stay in charge and to keep running the show. And while it does that, it can complain, of course. It's lovely, isn't it? The complaining about all the dreadful things that are happening. Does that help anyone? No. Did the Buddha, who taught 2,500 years ago how to go beyond suffering, did he say, I'm not telling you how to go beyond suffering because so many humans on this planet are still suffering. Let's wait for them to come to an end of suffering, and then I'll tell you the secret, and then we can all become enlightened. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't start with let's wait for the rest of the universe to become enlightened, and then we can enter the spiritual dimension. It has to start from you. Any change on the planet, in order to be true change and not just a variation on the same theme, must entail a change in consciousness, because whatever humans produce, whatever they manifest externally, arises and corresponds to arises out of their state of consciousness. If that state of consciousness is dysfunctional, disharmonious, negative, fearful, angry, and millions live in that state, identified with their ego, then you get a huge collective egos fighting other collective egos, and that's the insanity. Change has to change. We both agree that change is necessary, but it doesn't come from out there. It would also apply to your own lives. There are some people who come to me and say, I have to sort out various outstanding matters in my life, that big problem still in my business situation and my living situation, and this, I don't really have time to go into all this spiritual stuff because there's too much for me to deal with at the moment, or as the expression goes, I have too much on my plate to have time for spiritual awakening. That has to wait, but I have to sort these things out first. And if you do that, of course, you'll find that the time never comes, because there's no end to the problems that arise out there. Jesus told the same story in the parable of the wedding feast. People are invited to a wedding feast, and each person has their particular excuse why they cannot come to the wedding feast. One person says, oh, I've got to have some business dealings to do, just have to sell my cows and sheep and need to do that. Let me first do that, maybe I'll come then. The other one says, oh, my father has just died, let me first bury my father. Every excuse starts with the words, let me first do this. And that shows the prevalent attitude of believing that something out there needs to change before I can, or in your case, before I feel justified in looking for inner peace. But that is a fallacy. The external peace can only come when humans, or at least a sufficiently large number of humans, embrace inner peace. And you can't wait for the torture and killings to stop and then embrace inner peace. Change happens from the inside out, not from the outside in. So, yes, knowing that at this very moment, every second, every minute, dreadful things are happening on the planet. Of course, it's always been like that. At this very moment, somebody's being murdered, perhaps bombs are exploding, people are torturing, kidnapping others, warfare between armies or gangs. Of course, it's happening every moment. Does your anxiety help that situation, your non-peace? No. But if there's a shift in consciousness, there may be a change, and that starts with you. So don't believe what your mind is telling you about the undesirability of inner peace, because the world is so mad and so violent. That does not make sense if you look closely.